everyone. My name is Ashley Amwando. I am the proud NICU mom of three NICU graduates. I have twins that were born 3 days apart, 25 weeks and 25 weeks plus three. And I also have a 36 weeker in 3 days. So I have kind of the spectrum of preemies, of the very micro to the late term preemie. With my twins is really was my true introduction to the NICU. We spent about 4 months there, and so I'd love to share a few things with everyone on what really resonated with us, and some things that I think can really improve a family's experience while they're in the NICU. So a few things I wanted to highlight. One is words matter. The words that are used in the NICU help establish trust or help establish distrust, especially those early days. So things that were said to us to help establish trust were things like, don't think of the babies having a setback, but think of it as they're getting what they need in this moment to thrive. We also were asked often if we had questions, if we needed things explained, if we agreed or disagreed with the care plan. We were included from day one in their care, and that made a significant difference to establish that trust for us. Some things that also can impact are, maybe it comes off as a joke, but for a NICU parent going through a trauma who feels like I know I had this, you feel like a failure. Hearing things like, oh, the baby's misbehaving really makes a negative impact on the parent because it's like yet another thing I'm failing. My kid's misbehaving, which is such a silly way to think of it. But you're dealing with people that aren't necessarily in their best state of mind and best place. And so those words, really focusing on how can we support you in that care really matters. I also heard often that this was safe. So, for example, doing a skin to skin very early on in our days, that the words that were used were this is safe for the baby. Everything feels unsafe in the NICU. So if you're reiterating that word verbally, it also can really help parents. And then finally, I would just like to also call out the prioritization of the family in the care for the babies. These preemies are going to be preemies after they leave the NICU. So, or, babies that have medical needs are going to have medical needs after they leave the NICU. So, involving the family not only improves their clinical outcomes, the family's bonding, but it also starts that base of parents learning how to advocate for their children, and being a part of their care and feeling like parents and not just visitors to the NICU. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Summer McBride, and I'm a mother of five sons. I'm also a longtime advocate for families navigating maternal and infant health, but that advocacy was most profoundly shaped by my own NICU experience. About 20 years ago, my second pregnancy was uneventful until the day my water broke. When I went to the hospital, I was told it hadn't ruptured and that I had probably just urinated on myself. I knew that wasn't true, but I trusted the system. My OB was never notified after that, and my concerns were mostly ignored. About a week later, I returned in active labor, and within hours, my baby's heart rate began to drop with every contraction. In a moment, everything started to feel so fast, and like I couldn't keep up with the pace we were moving. I was placed under a general anesthesia and taken in for an emergency C-section that I had not planned for. Because who plans for an emergency C-section? When I woke up, I remember feeling so alone. Hours had passed before anyone told me where my son was or how he was doing. Eventually, my husband walked in with a neonatologist who told us our son needed to be transported immediately to another hospital. I wasn't allowed to hold him. I couldn't see him until I asked, because they were already preparing him for transportation. So they allowed me to go to the NICU, and I saw my son for the first time in a mobile incubator, and he was wearing nothing but a diaper, and his body was covered in wires, and his chest was just moving so rapidly because he was struggling to breathe. It was at that moment that I started to somewhat realize that my life was going to be changed forever. This was not a normal birth experience. This was my second child, so I had had a normal birth experience. This was brand new. And what helped during that NICU journey was having clear, compassionate communication from providers who were willing to slow down and explain what was happening to me, and providers who treated us like partners rather than spectators of our child's development. When someone used language that acknowledged our fear, made us feel seen, acknowledged our humanity, and especially acknowledged our role as parents, as partners in this process, that really helped ground us. What didn't help was the silence. When we were left without updates, when we were repeatedly told what they expected to happen, but it didn't happen, like maybe he'll be discharged today, or maybe he'll be brought back to this hospital before he's discharged, but then that didn't happen right away. Being left without the updates, hearing only the risks and deficits without context or any hope that they wouldn't affect his development, having our concerns minimized instead of explored, and just not being listened to when we shared our concerns. Our son spent about a month in the NICU, and while he eventually came home, the NICU was still a part of our life. We left the NICU, but the NICU didn't leave us. For years, there were medical visits. Those medical visits triggered panic. He had night terrors and meltdowns every time we were in any kind of medical facility. And at the time, I didn't have language for it, but I know now, 20 years later, that was trauma that he was experiencing. And it was a long road for us, but today our son is 20 and he's a thriving college student. He's focusing on music production and composing original pieces. Um, the outcome that we had still doesn't erase, though, how critical those early interactions were for bonding. Our mental health was affected, and honestly, our long-term trust in medical care systems was affected. That experience is why I now facilitate trauma-informed NICU parent support groups and work alongside families, especially Black families, to create spaces where they feel seen and heard, and they know that they're going to be listened to. My hope for providers is honestly not that complicated. Um, for the providers, I would ask that you remember that when you speak, every single word you say, every pause, every assumption you make, every explanation you give or explanation you fail to give has an impact on that family. And communication is not just information. Communication is absolutely a form of care. And it is one of the best forms of care that you can provide. And the connection that you make isn't extra. It really is a part of the healing process. In moments of extreme vulnerability, and NICU families feel very vulnerable, in those moments of extreme vulnerability, communication and connection often become the most defining elements of a family's NICU experience. And I would hope that you would remember that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sylvia Bohr, and I'm a NICU mom. My son was a 24-weeker. His name is Felix, and he was in the NICU for 5 months. When I was in the NICU, honestly, the scariest part of the whole experience was the unknown. It was traumatizing. It was scary. It was so difficult to be there. And when you don't know the language in the NICU, like how much more unknown is this journey? How much more traumatizing is it to not be able to understand what's going on around you? Even as an English speaker, the medical language, everybody running around, it was overwhelming. And it was just so frightening. I'm a Spanish and English speaking NICU mom, so I had the benefit of witnessing the differences in treatment for both English speaking and Spanish speaking parents. In some ways, I was able to experience both. As an English speaker, I received one form of treatment, and as a Spanish speaker, I was able to sort of experience it by proxy because I was really fortunate to be able to help other Spanish only speaking families while I was there in translating. So there were a lot of day-to-day conversations that they were having. And whenever I was around, I would get pulled in and I would translate for them. But the day-to-day stuff, so, when you're in the room and the nurse comes in and you have those chats and you build a rapport, I had that benefit. I had that experience all the time. My husband and I formed really fantastic friendships and relationships with the whole team. And it really makes me wonder, what were the Spanish-speaking families experiencing? Did they actually have that, or was it really just strictly business, or the bare minimum, like, hi, how are you? I think when you're working across, like through a translator, there's a lot that can be lost. One of the moms specifically that I remember, she was a NICU nurse, and she only spoke Spanish. She was from Colombia, I think, and the communication was really difficult. I had to translate the words, but there was a lot, like the emotion, kind of those scary things. It was lost because everything was so fast. And so if she had any follow-up questions, if I wasn't around, she had to wait and write everything down. And I think in those moments, it becomes even more traumatizing. And I also think that those everyday chats with the nurses and the doctors is where you build your confidence and your resilience as a parent. Because if all you're getting is the big reports, you're not really getting, the nitty gritty details. And then also, how can the staff be receptive to these families that don't speak the language if there isn't full transparency and communication? I really truly believe that family-centered care is only possible when both families and providers understand each other. And that includes where they're at emotionally, how much confidence they have in the options that are available for treatment, and what their roles are in this process. So language barriers like this automatically limit the words used to the bare minimum, and the NICU really requires more. We need to do better to support families that don't speak English as a first language, so that the unknown becomes known, and also to reduce trauma and improve mental health outcomes. And ultimately, this is so that those babies and their families can thrive. Thank you.